All right. So let's go ahead. Uh, all right. So we have how do you pronounce your name again? Sorry, I keep on Clay Edward, right?
Yeah, Clay Edward.
All right, you guys. Welcome to Spirit Love Podcast. We have Clay Edwards, and today we're talking about the importance of diversity as well as the queer community. So thanks so much for being on. You've done so many inspirational TikToks. Oh, we lost you.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Oh, I'll just start again. All right. So, all right. So let's go ahead. All right, you guys. Thanks for joining the Spirit Love Podcast. I'm here with Clay Edwards, which is an awesome TikToker as well as Instagrammer, Snapchat. You got so many outlets of social media. This is awesome. But you talk specifically about experiences of a queer man of diversity in a community, and also how to fight discrimination, which I love. So
Yeah.
tell me, how did you get started on a lot of these social media outlets, and why is it so important for you to talk about the experience as a queer person of diversity?
Yeah, so I wanted to start conversations on social media that a lot of people were scared to talk about. I decided to use TikTok as my outlet because I know that TikTok is very popular. A lot of people are using it, and it is a great way to get your platform and voice heard out into the world. So I thought that would be a great way to kind of start my journey as a content creator and a conversationalist. And I specifically wanted to talk about social justice because I feel like a lot of things in the social justice world that don't get talked about should start being talked about. And I thought, why not be the person to make that change?
Awesome. You're doing a great job. I've seen a lot of TikTokers use your videos to comment on. And then right away, I was like, man, I actually didn't see your video individually. I saw your video because it was commented on by another creator. And
Yeah.
that automatically was like, okay, I got to figure out how to contact this person, which I'm so glad you're here today. So I want to talk to you about a really crazy issue, okay, which is in our community. Now, here's the deal. This is an article by The Guardian by Owen Jones. And what they're saying right now in the article is that, according to research by FS Magazine, an astonishing 80% of Black men, 79% of Asian men, and 75% of South Asian men have experienced racism on the gay scene. How do you feel about that?
I feel like that's very accurate and it's also very sad. I know that a lot of gay, queer people of color experience racism through dating apps, especially Grindr, with the whole no blacks, no Asians, and things of that nature. And I feel like that's a really sad occurrence that happens in our community, but it needs to be spoken. It needs to be spoken about more, and it's really sad. And it also happens at gay clubs and pride festivals, which is sad because those are supposed to be safe spaces for our community, but we don't always feel safe in those spaces. So it is something that our community has to start working on.
It's interesting, and I love that is there. The one thing I want to talk about is like, I wonder how much of it is the app, how much of it is our community. Because a lot of times I'm like, well, the app's not saying that. Our own community is saying that. Because a lot of people automatically blame Grindr, like, oh, Grindr's the reason. I'm like, why? I'm like, no, Grindr's not the reason why. We're the reason why. So how do we become more accountable to our own community?
Well, we got to call out the things that happen. And
Mhm.
a lot of people are scared to call it out because you're right. It's not Grinder, it's us. We're doing this. We're saying these things. Yeah, Grinder might have created the no blacks, no Asians label, but who is using that label? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's stuff like that. The fact that those are even labels that still might be used to this day is an issue that our community needs to call out. That's why we really shouldn't be using those kind of apps, if you ask me personally, because of the racism that's embedded into those apps, especially when those are apps specifically designed for queer people, yet they're also dividing and causing division amongst queer people. So it's stuff like that that we really, as a community, need to tackle and speak on about more.
Exactly, exactly. So I want to talk about the issue of when you finally do speak up against the racism and injustice in our community. Right away, I know for sure the majority of your community will come at you and be like, hey, these are your preferences. There's nothing wrong with that. By telling us we can't have preferences, you're actually doing us injustice. How are your
Yeah.
feelings towards that?
So, okay, so preferences, people use that word out of its original context. A preference is where you prefer something, but you're open to other things as well. Taking me, for example, I prefer vanilla ice cream, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to try other ice cream flavors because, yes, I have a preference, but I'll still give others a chance. And
Mhm.
that's how it should be in the queer scene when it comes to dating. Yeah, you might prefer one thing, but you should at least be open and give other people a chance who might not fit your personal preference. But a lot of people say preference to X out or exclude other people under the guise of, oh, well, it's just a preference. I'm not racist. And it doesn't necessarily work like that. But unfortunately, not too many people get that, which is why a lot of people hide their racism through the guise of a preference.
Oh yeah, and I just want to say, obviously we read some stats already, so we know
Yeah.
it's there. So anytime someone says that's not true, they're choosing to understand that this is an issue, but they don't want to admit to it, right? They're purposely
Right.
being knowledgeable, they're purposely being unwilling to learn this knowledge. Also, there's over 70 countries in the world where it's illegal to be gay. There's over
Oh, yeah.
12 countries in the world where it's punishable by death to be gay. Okay. To understand that aspect, to say, oh, that's not an issue, obviously it is. Um, it's so crazy that we do that. Why do you think that so many people do that? So why do you think so many people refuse to acknowledge the issue and just say that's not really happening?
Because a lot of, and I'm gonna speak this, I'm gonna speak about this on my TikTok soon, but a lot of people don't care about oppression until it affects them personally.
Mm.
And because of that, a lot of people aren't able to empathize with other people who don't go through the same struggles as them. But when it affects them personally, they want the whole world to care.
Mm.
For example, if a straight man walked up to a gay guy, or no, if a gay guy walked up to a straight man and, the gay guy was talking to him and was just trying to, get to know him, and the straight man was like, get away from me, fag, that would be horrible. That's a horrible thing to say. And that's very oppressive. So why would we do that and inflict that same pain onto our own community that we also have to deal with? So it's one of those things where people don't understand that we're all oppressed, but now we're starting to oppress each other. And
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
exactly. I think a lot of it is willful ignorance. You
Yeah.
know, they're choosing to not acknowledge it, even though their stats are there. And also if there's not just stats, there's personal stories. I know that for me, even like when I'm in the queer community, sometimes I start seeing discrimination right there in front of me. I see a lot of people just say, oh yeah, well, like I don't like blacks, or Asians are all this way. And I'm like, no, they're not. Like, like for someone to say, oh, it's my preference not to like blacks or Asians, I'm like, have you seen every Asian out there? Have you seen every black person out there? There's millions of them. So how do you categorize a whole entire culture by like the few people, like probably 4 or 5 people you've seen?
Because people generalize. And it's crazy because it's like no one wants to date a black person or an Asian person unless they're fetishizing you.
Mm.
Everybody wants an Asian twink or everybody wants a BBC. But it's just like, besides all of that, can you get to know me for a person? Can you get to know me for who I am?
Yeah.
It's crazy. But again, that's just something that the queer community has to work on.
Oh yeah, no, I totally feel it, because for me, even though I'm Asian, I'm 6'2", and
Yeah.
I'm like thick, which is THICC. Yes. So I'm thick, which I love, but a lot of it's just not understandable because like they want us to be the stereotype, which is funny because again, they'll say things like, oh yeah, well, I don't want, an Asian person because of this. But then when they defy that, they're like, oh, well, you're different. So that's weird. So it's kind of crazy. They'll fit either way.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you have to fit this standard or this mold to be considered attractive. And it's sad. It's really sad.
Exactly. So I also want to ask you a difficult question. Okay. So this question goes with our community. I see, unfortunately, a lot of Black, normally lighter skinned Black people, as well as Asian people, participate in this type of racism. Now, when I say it's because they'll say, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with their preferences. That's just how they are. It's fine. Da, 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 da. So they'll often excuse a lot of the injustice that happens. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that also just kind of goes back to colorism. And a lot of people don't recognize their privilege that they have with colorism because obviously and this is just me speaking from what I've seen, lighter skinned Asians have a easier time dating than darker skinned Asians, you know, like South Indian might have a more difficult time dating than somebody who is lighter skinned from Vietnam or China, you know what I mean? So it's just things like that. And also in the Black community, colorism's a big thing. And then you add the gay community into that, it's an even bigger thing. So it's just, it goes back to people not knowing how oppression feels until it affects them personally.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's sad, but it's something that our community needs to work on and address. And I also just feel like if you don't know somebody's experience, try to get to know about it, because you never know. The same thing could happen to you, but in a different form. And then you're going to want people to care about you and your experience.
Yeah.
So,
No, I totally agree. What's interesting to me is not just the color of your skin, but also your features. Do you have more European-like features? Like I know in like the Philippines and Southeast Asia, like you can be
yeah.
darker skinned as long as you have, you know, more European-like features, like again, the point to your nose, the
Mhm.
fuller lips, things like that, or like the less slanted eyes. And that's definitely something that comes out a lot because they'll say, oh, well, I'm mixed, even when they're not mixed. And I see a lot of it happening. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's either you're lighter skinned or you have more Europeanized features.
Yeah, it ties into colorism and featureism. And
Yeah.
that all goes back to westernized standard of beauty. And just westernized beauty has done a numbers on not only America and the world, but also the gay community. You know, everybody wants the ideal Ken figure of the community. You know, everybody wants a Ken doll,
It's made
and
of plastic,
everybody,
guys.
yeah, everybody wants a Ken doll and everybody wants to act like Barbie. It's just, it's crazy how that's become so ingrained in our community to the point where other people who don't fit the Ken stereotype or the Ken mold are now getting X'd out and feeling excluded from their own community. So, yeah.
Exactly. So can you talk to both me as well as the audience, if you are someone that is a person with diversity, especially of different body sizes, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Um, you have to start off with self-love.
Mhm.
Self-love is a lot harder than it sounds because
Mhm.
I'm struggling with it. There are times when I look in the mirror and I hate my body, you know what I mean? And it makes me really depressed because I know that I probably wouldn't have as much of an issue with my body if other people didn't have an issue with my body. In the queer community, fat phobia is really rampant, along with racism and colorism and things of that nature. So you have to love yourself, and that takes time. It's not easy, but it takes time. And I also am a firm believer of safe spaces. So, and it's unfortunate because the queer community is supposed to be a safe space, but it's not always a safe space for people who don't fit their mold. You know what I mean? So I would say just having a safe space for queer people of color, or, you know, queer people who identify as fat, or, you know, queer people that don't always feel represented, for us to have our own safe space to uplift each other, grab each other by the hand and say, it's okay, you're enough, and you're beautiful. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. I really love that. If you'd like, I would love to create something maybe on TikTok, or we could create an avenue for people that are dealing with body issues to have a safe space in the future.
I would love to.
Awesome, awesome. Um, I have so many questions for you, just like boggling my head right now.
It's okay.
Um, so I was also wondering, you know, what are outlets we can have to expand our mindset? You know, because a lot of times we focus on this very generalized opinion of what it means to be queer. I don't, for me, like, especially, I read on the article, especially with the Guardian, you know, majority of our politicians, a majority of what we grew up with the magazines has been majority Caucasian,
Yeah.
Caucasian queer men. So what
Yeah.
are some ways you think we could expand horizon within creating more awareness for people of color and people of diversity?
Um, I would say representation definitely matters.
Mhm.
So I think, wow, that's a really good question. Because, yeah, representation definitely matters because I feel like everybody should be seen in our community. So I
Mhm.
think a good way to implement that would be through first the media, and also just kind of giving queer people of color their spotlight to speak on their issues, because a lot of times people group our struggle as queer people as everyone's struggle, not realizing that queer people of color go through our own separate struggle on top of being queer. So I think also giving us a spotlight and a place for us to share our own stories and our own experiences would also help give light to that.
That's amazing. That's great advice. Definitely, I want the audience, please participate. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. Actually, posting a preview on TikTok. So, and also engage with Clay. He's an amazing TikToker as well as social media representative. And I really encourage you to be part of everything he does, including mine. So the last question I had was, how do you think that as a community we create a safer space? Because I see a lot of this issue within apps. Do you think that there's any resources right now that are provided that can actually offer resources for, again, that self-love or acceptance for different body types of people of color?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
If there
it's
are any
difficult. Again, we're in
reasons,
2022, but this is still an issue, right?
I don't think so. I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. And if we have, I just haven't seen it personally. But I personally have not. And um it's sad because this should be started. And I get a lot of comments on my TikTok of people telling me, I'm queer or I'm gay, but I don't feel accepted by my community. So I feel like I shouldn't, go to gay clubs or show my face anywhere because people won't accept me. And it's that same way with trans people. I think people forget that the T for LGBT stands for trans, and even trans people don't feel included or welcomed in the community. So a lot of people feel ostracized, and unfortunately, I don't see many things being done about it. But hopefully, throughout the future, I or someone else or we can change that narrative
Yes, I
and help
agree. I'm
people
totally
of
down
me.
for it. So let's talk about the mental health struggle, because a
Mhm.
lot of times what people don't realize is that this is a big issue, right? As I said before, there's a lot of willful ignorance in our community.
Right.
And not only do we have huge stats between discrimination of people of color and diversity in general, but also there's over 70 countries in the world where it's illegal to be gay. There's over 12 countries in the world where it's punishable by death to be gay. So
Yeah.
knowing this, how do we increase discrimination and also trauma that we create for our own community? Because I know that we deal with a lot of trauma, especially for me. I dealt with bullying. I dealt with a lot of discrimination for being both Asian and gay, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have the whole issue of homophobia. So you have multiple levels of discrimination, which a lot of people don't talk about, especially as a gay Black person. Can you talk to me about the experiences of the injustice you face? Because obviously it's more than just homophobia. There's racism, there's body phobia. How would you talk about your experience within that?
Yeah. It's hard to talk about because not a lot of people know how it feels. And one thing I can say is that being oppressed when you're a double minority sucks, but it sucks even worse when it comes from people within your own community.
Yes.
And as a queer person, as queer people of color, you and I, we both know what it feels like to not only be oppressed by straight people, but also people within our own community. And that stings even worse. So sometimes it's hard to share our personal experiences because not a lot of people know what we go through. And the people that do know what we go through, some care, some may not. So it can be hard. How I would share my story is, how would I share my story? That's a good question. You're asking me really good
I'm
questions.
so sorry.
You're asking really good
Take your
questions.
time. Take your time.
But I mean, I do want to be remembered. So, like I said, I love writing. So, I would definitely share my story through my writing, and I share my story through content creation. So, I try to get my story out because I know that my story could also help somebody else. Because when I was growing up, I was looking for other people who had similar experiences as me, and I found none. So maybe my story can help another kid who's going through the same struggles that I'm going through or went through. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. It's like he has a lot of stories and also experiences on TikTok if you guys want to check it out, as well as his Instagram, and you have Snapchat as well, right?
And YouTube.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Awesome. Awesome opportunities. I think for me, it's really interesting because, like, when I was a kid, I remember being in class sitting down, and then this one girl, she was all like slanting her eyes and she was laughing. She started doing this. She's like, "Oh, look." And I was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm doing your eyes right now." She's like, "I have the same eyes as you." And I said, "What's your problem? Why would you do that? That's racist." She's like, "I'm racist? What are you talking about? I don't have your chinky ass eyes. Why do you think it's crazy for me to call it racist?" And I'm like, "Well, it is racist." And the problem I had, and so I'm talking about within people who see it happen, but don't do anything about it, or also participate in it. So I saw a lot of Asian people, both male and female, that were like, "Oh, it's okay, what she's doing is fine." They actually were like, "Yeah, no, I'm not offended." And I'm like, "Why aren't you offended?" And that's why I see a lot in our queer community as well. We see a lot of people who are like, "Oh yeah, those are your preference. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that." As a Black person or Asian person or Middle Eastern person, it's so important for us to stand up and be like, "Hey, no, this is wrong." And I feel like that's the major problem we have in our community, is that we see these things happening and we choose to be willfully ignorant, right? Or we participate in it, which I see a lot of people do. Like, "Oh yeah, if they don't like Black people, that's fine. Doesn't mean they're racist." I'm like, "Yeah, it kind of does. I'm sorry, it does." And I feel like that's the biggest problem. So I dealt with that when I was a kid. Also, I just want to say I saw some of these people. They're now Asian activists, and I'm like, that's fine, great. But at the same time, where were you when they were calling me chink? Where were you when they were saying things like, "Oh, here's my eyes now"? This is a problem. Being willfully ignorant or not accountable for what you've done is also problematic. So I dealt with that with discrimination. As I came out as a queer person, as a gay man, what I experienced, I lost a lot of friends, and I hate to say that. It's true. I think it's always an issue to come out to your friends because you never know how they're going to react. I had one best friend who was straight, and we were friends for 5 years. As soon as I came out, didn't change a thing, has never changed a thing. I've always been the same person. He automatically said, "I don't think I could be your friend anymore." And he was honest with me. He's like, "I don't think I could deal with the same discrimination that you deal with, because even though, like, I'm not gay myself, by associating with you, people also think that I'm gay. Therefore, we can't hang out together anymore." So this is a major problem, and this is a problem I see a lot, especially in the Asian community. There's so many Asians that are, I'm sorry, to either gay, bisexual, whatever queerness they follow, that do not come out because they're worried about being not accepted by the community. They're worried about being rejected by the community. So I face, racism, and I also face discrimination through homophobia. And it's something I've dealt with not just one time, but many times throughout my life. And still today, I have friends who are like, "Oh, well, we like you as a person, right? But I'm afraid to bring you to a party because people think because you're outwardly gay. People know you're gay because you do videos, you are open about your sexuality. We're afraid of how they're gonna look at us, which is also an issue." So I think the problem is that a lot of times you deal with multiple issues. And I've seen it within, like, the Asian community, the Black community. I have one Black friend, he won't come out to his relatives. He's afraid of how they're gonna think about him.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens a lot. And I'm not gonna say that when I had came out, I lost friends, because a lot of people kind of already knew, whatever. But that does happen a lot. And it's sad, because it's like, and as a society, it's like we try to act like we're so progressive and we love each other and we should all be one big happy family, but we discriminate against one another.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And like I said, what you're describing, a lot of other people who are of the same background as you have also experienced. And it's one of those things where it's like, it sucks. It
Yeah.
really sucks. And it won't change until we change it. But of course, that's easier said than done.
Exactly. But the one thing I want to talk about is I really feel like it starts with our own community first. Because if we know we have to deal with this much trauma outside of our community, why we include it within our own community.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Clay, for being part of this podcast. You did an amazing job as always. How can people find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on TikTok at Clay Edward. That's ClayEdward. You can find me on Instagram at Clay with two Y's .Edward. And you can find me on YouTube. You can subscribe to my channel if you'd like at Clay Edward. And there's a space in between. So yeah, you can find me that way. And I would love for you to become a part of my family.
And I encourage everyone, you definitely should. He is an amazing speaker, as well as activist. I feel like a lot of what you do incorporates aspects of being queer person of color and also fighting injustice. You can find me at Spirit Love 82 on Instagram, as well as Alex Tip on Facebook and Alex Tip on TikTok as well. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I'll talk to you all later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So I'm gonna stop recording. Let's see. Ooh, let's see.